Thank you everybody for coming and getting some information tonight. This is a workshop, so I'm open to questions. Interrupt me anytime. I've got a PowerPoint presentation to kind of cover some issues, and certainly would like to answer any questions anybody has. So, start with, it'll work. We're going to have a quick introduction, which we're doing right now. I'm going to go over Proposition 218, which governs this process. We're going to go an overview of costs and cuts, an overview of staffing here at PID. We're going to review the rate structure that's been put out in your Prop 218 notice, your latest one. We're going to talk about the wetlands, and then I have a little slide that kind of shows you the service charge versus consumption. So right now, we're in a 45-day public review. For you that don't know, Paradise Irrigation District is a local government of the state of California. We're a government agency, special district that is run by a 5-member board of directors that are elected by you folks. You may not remember seeing them on the ballot recently. That's because if nobody runs against them, they get appointed if they're unopposed. But they are elected if we have an election, and they govern everything we do, policies, budgets, rate setting, etc. They gave me direction to have these workshops, to work with you, answer your questions, and get your input. I just finalized a March 30th board meeting at the Paradise Performing Arts Center. So in that board meeting, I hope to take all of your input, some employee concessions or cuts at that point to them, and then they will make a determination of what the final rate they're considering to approve is. What was sent out to you is a ceiling. So because we're kind of under the gun here, they can approve a rate less than that, but we have to assure that every customer class rate is less than what is proposed in that document. We'll talk a little more about that as we go along. So here's the cost. This is what the rate structure is built on. You've got our operating and pipeline costs. These costs you're seeing up here, that's mostly our day-to-day business. So that's employee salaries, keeping the doors open, keeping the system running, treating the water, and getting it delivered to you. Currently we have $50,000 in conservation, and this year, because we have a state, we've been told by the state at this point, they will finalize their decision in the next month or two, that even though our reservoirs are full and spilling, in fact they're 7/10 spilling, we're under a 33% conservation mandate by the state. Our board will decide how to proceed with that in April. And we'll let our public know what our response is to that request, or actually more than that, their mandate. This is our debt. It's our current debt. So those are borrowings we currently have. This is new debt. So when you see that big jump in the 3rd year of the rate proposal, that's this big number right here. That is to fund our processed water recycle project. Another state mandate that we have to comply with. This number right here of 1.2 million, that is $15 million borrowed over 20 years at 5% interest. That is what the market is for a public agency to go out to the market and borrow money. What we are working on actively is getting state revolving fund loan for this project. So the state funds it. And by doing that, if we get approved, we can spread it over 30 years at 2% interest. Yes, sir.
But that's all based on the idea that we're going to go to the new water plant.
Yes.
Okay? So, I mean, my reasoning would be, if I were to think about it, was, I mean, with not showing, let's say, 2015 or 2016, would have been that that money, that budget could have supported this budget without the water plant. Okay? That is, if the water plant was never propagated or never gotten into,
Yeah.
that debt would not have been there. Okay, the water plant meant that that's what the reality is in terms of 2017, 2018. But had, for example, you could have gone back to 2015 or 2014, you could have used those figures for the consumption and the cost that everybody sees, you know, if you hadn't gone to the water plant. So there's, what I'm getting at is, there's logic there not to go to the water plant. I mean, you know,
Okay.
and that's a point of contention here and everything, like,
Okay.
too, where that money's being spent. I mean, and Bill's wetlands, and you're gonna get the wetlands later on too, I want to ask some questions about that.
Okay.
But why not consider, you know, that is, I know that 218 comes along and says you gotta have certain water qualities now and everything, but why couldn't the rate structure have been something that, you know, that would be reflective of the 2015, 2014 budget, and just, you know, scrap the water plant problem, debt at this time, don't build it, and not have to contend with Prop 218.
Okay. Prop 218 is a rate setting rule. It has nothing to do with whether we build a water plant or not. Okay. I will talk about that when we get to wetlands and explain the decisions that were made, why we were heading down the path we were. But let me clarify something. And that's a good point, I appreciate it. The reason we have to do 3 years and we can't just do this year is because for us to qualify to borrow funds, whether it's through a private agency or the state, we have to prove to them that in our rates we have the ability to pay that debt. And we do that by adopting a rate structure that includes that money to pay that debt.
Okay, but, okay, you got that on the books now and everything, but why not scrap the water plant? You got $700,000 in project analysis and everything, project
Engineering, yep.
looking at and everything. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, you know, with the wetlands project, given a couple of chemical problems and everything that I understand and everything, go along with wetlands and everything, you could have, you know, you could postpone this and everything. I mean, because and I wouldn't have ever had to been on Prop 2, I mean, you know, been on Prop 218 to have.
Okay.
I mean, there are operations that are water operations that don't use a power plant. There are operations that use the wetlands.
Okay, let's cover that when we get to wetlands.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough? So in these proposed rates, we have all of these categories. We have reserving, which our reserves are down to $700,000, and I'll show you that in a minute. So we have reserving built into this rate structure. Reserving is for emergency response. It's going to be for rate stabilization. I wish we would have already had this decision made, but one of our first tasks of the CFO is to work with the board to adopt a reserving policy. So all of you know what our targets are, what we're shooting to reserve. You can come to those public meetings, give your input, but we need to establish a reserving policy. Also, at the last minute, at the board meeting, there was an approval to spend to include $300,000 for a wetland study. And when I go through wetlands, we'll talk about that and get your input on that. That's $2.20 per meter for 1 year, per equivalent meter. We do get some non-rate revenue, so we get a little bit of property taxes, we have some rents, we have some recreation revenue, I think it's in there as well. And we can use that to provide some discounts for certain categories. We as a district have provided lower cost water to our agricultural customers. There's about a dozen of them for as long as we've been here. Reason being they don't need treated water. It's just been a support structure for that ag community in town. Some years ago, before I got here, I've been here 11 years. I'm George Barker, by the way, I might not have said that. I apologize. I've actually been in Paradise since I was 4 years old. But there was actually a community survey that was sent out to find out if people still supported providing a lower cost alternative to our ag customers, and it overwhelmingly was supported at that time. So some of that is built into the calculation. And then some things to point out. We've got operating and pipeline. I talked about that, pointed it out up here. That's our cost of doing business day to day, just running the place. And so in this rate structure, you can see this is where it was in 2015. If we implement the cuts that are proposed, you're only seeing about a 1.19% increase in operating. You see a 7% jump in 2017. And when I get into personnel, you'll understand why that is. And then to a 1.61 in 2018. So any questions on the costs? Yes?
Yes. So on the proposed rates, I see a debt surcharge, a reserve surcharge, and a service charge.
Yes.
So I think I can correlate the debt and the reserve.
Yep.
And so the service would be which part? Everything else?
Everything else. Yep. And what we've done is all of those have been lumped into the service charge in the past. And what I propose to the board and what we're putting out to you is let's be upfront with our public and show them this is what our debt is, and this is what you're paying towards debt, this is what you're paying towards reserving. And it's just a straight out calculation. There's nothing hidden in there. So that we're more upfront with you folks. Any other questions on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
On the 300,000 wetland study, at the first reading at the former North, one of the board members subjected that particular price at that time with the objection of Mr. Shaw. Have you studied that and think that 300 is overpriced, or is that what it's going to cost for a test? I know they had a $35,000 allotment before that they used.
That we spent before, yeah.
That didn't do much good.
Yeah.
Have you done anything on your studies to think that 300 might be a bit overreach? He just spoke up and said 300,000.
Yeah.
I think they're a little heavy.
I don't know if it's heavy. We have on our board agenda a request for proposals. And so we've kind of highlighted what we need to know in a feasibility study, and then we get proposals based on that. So if it was less, then it would be less.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the $700,000 reserve, that's additional every year to be added to the reserve?
Yes. Yes.
And this may be jumping ahead, you might want to wait. I was wondering if there's time to do the wetland study and still meet the state compliance deadline.
Yeah, that's a good question. What I have told the state is that this is a parallel path. So right now we're not engineering at all, but we would continue to engineer and do the study at the same time, and then there'd be a decision point whether we proceed with the one alternative or
Okay,
the
so
other.
in fact, you could quit it if you wanted to.
Pardon?
That is, you could quit that project, you could quit the plant project.
Yeah, we have our agreement with the engineer is set so that we can cut it off at any time.
Okay, is that where the 700,000 went? I mean, thus far, as I'm understanding it,
Yeah.
that's where the 700,000 went?
In engineering.
Okay, and I agree, I mean, I'm following this gentleman over here, that, and it really disturbed me for the example of it at one of the first meetings and everything, that whomever it was on the board made it, asking this question whether or not, you wanted to spend $3 million in order to try to find something that didn't work, okay? Or to find out whether it would work or not, okay? Because that sure as hell should have been the case, okay? As far as my thinking goes, I mean, instead of
Okay.
this budgeting and everything, you talk about, 30 years or whatever, the government, supplementing new debt and everything, I'd say stop the plant project thought and pick up with the wetlands and see if that works, and if that settles, I mean, just the concept of 218, screw 218 then, because you don't have to comply with 218 then.
We always have to comply with 218.
Oh, okay.
218 is our rate setting rules.
Okay.
The process water recycle project
All right, so
is about our,
set the rate setting rules on the probability, of the possibility of the wetlands project working, solving the problems.
hold that thought. Let me explain
Okay.
the wetlands and so everyone knows how the board reached where they're at. So what's the increase drivers? And you referenced some of them. This isn't a really too new slide, but I want to cover it. So it's the general increase in cost of doing business. In 2011 was the last time we proposed a rate increase. It was a 3-year rate increase. Staff and the finance committee recommended at that time that the board implement a 12% rate increase in year 1 and then 4% and 4%. Then it came to the board for a decision, and the board determined that because the economy was still struggling in town, and based on their input from the public, they adopted a 3% increase in year 1 instead of 12, and then a 4% and a 4%, and they delayed it 6 months. So some of those costs that we knew that were coming have caught up with us. And then we have employee agreements and general costs of doing business. We have agreements that were approved by our board, 5-0 unanimously for both employee groups that go through 2017 and 2018. They're not huge changes in what the pay is, but there is costs. One thing they did do as a board is they linked any cost of living increase to the same as Social Security. So when you folks in the community did not get a Social Security increase on January 1st,
I did.
the employees didn't either. And so we lost $750,000 in revenue. You guys conserved, you hit the target. We needed you to, we appreciate it. It was more than what we would have liked, but it was what the state mandated us to do. We had about $300,000 in reserves for drought at that point, and that covered some of that cost. And then so far, we've spent about $750,000 on the design of the processed water treatment process. These were both unplanned expenses in that 2011 rate increase, and now we have depleted reserves that need to be replenished. When there is a catastrophe, the fires in 2008, an earthquake hits, or whatever, we're expected to be there to take care of the system, and we need to be prepared for that. If there's a huge disaster, we may not be able to deliver you water for 3 months. Maybe FEMA coming, you've seen it, FEMA coming in, bottled water, it'd be horrible. But guess what? We have 3 months of no revenue, but we still have to be out there taking care of the problems. Yes?
Just to kind of back up that statement, if you would read the article in the San Francisco Chronicle this Sunday, they explain the situation in Lake County after the fire, where one small utility district, water utility, now does not have a water utility treatment plant at all, and they're faced with just exactly that.
Yeah.
They can't afford a new one.
Yes.
Shouldn't have we been more stingy with the $10 million surplus we had then? Because
I'm going to cover that tonight. So I'm going to explain that 10 million. There's a lot of talk about where the $10 million goes. I'm going to explain it tonight.
I just like to say one other thing. I'd be far more in favor of the state mandated increase in employee pay and everything that went along with it. I mean, I really would. But what I really don't like is having, being forced in a position where the rate structure is including, what you showed, $1.6 million per year for
1.2
for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
See, I mean, it just doesn't ring. I mean, it really looks under the table in some respects. I mean,
Well,
it looks like
we'll keep talking about
looks like
that.
contracting, favorable contracting. It looks like appointments, possible appointments and everything. I know it's kind of a nasty slide to accusation in a way, but for some reason, why do we get into this sort of thing in the somebody's being favored by it, not us.
Yeah, again, I'll explain it more, but keep in mind, one of the reasons I broke out the debt is so that when we finalize it, when we just actually go out to borrow the money and we know what our debt is, then that debt reserve will turn into what reality is. We're not hiding anything, it's not blended into anything, we're telling you up front, this is what our debt is. And so if our debt goes down, then that number will go
That's
down.
really very nice and everything, but that's falling on the rates, the additional rates we have to pay and everything. I mean, I don't, I think that's a really poor representation of, why we're going to have a rates increase. When we don't have to necessarily, we could go back to, I keep going back to it, go back 2015, 2014, 13, and come up with an average of what that was, because that serviced everything that was out there to begin with. That serviced all the budgets subsequent to this water recycle project.
Okay, you're certainly entitled to that opinion.
Okay.
Keep listening. So where are the cuts? We've reduced capital expenses for quite a few years, and I've got a slide on that. We serve 25,785 people in this community with 37 employees. So that's about 1 per 700, making sure you have clean, safe drinking water. A lot of people are saying we can't afford this big, expensive project. We're not happy about it. I mean, we would rather not do it. But when it comes down to telling the state we can't afford it, or the federal government we can't afford it, they take a look at what's affordable. So the affordability index that they came up with is about 2% of mean household income. Our rates are about 1.6% of mean household income for a medium user and 1.1 for our low user. So when we we don't have the ability to tell the state we can't afford this when we're not talking about a project that doesn't meet their guidelines for unaffordable.
Mr. Bergen?
Yeah.
Wouldn't a better gauge be a median household income rather than mean? Mean is an average, right?
Yeah.
So it's taking a super high person and a low.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of, could be
Right.
very inflated.
Right.
I completely agree with you, especially in this community, but mean is what's available, and mean is the trigger they use, I only present it because that's how they gauge it.
And who is they, sir?
The state,
Okay.
So the percentage that you showed, the percentages, that's before or after the rate increase?
that's 2016, that's the 2016 rate increase.
So what will it be after the rate increase?
Good question, I'll have to do that math, I haven't done it.
Do you know what the
Yes.
mean household income is for Paradise?
$44,560 a year, I believe.
And how about the average employee wage?
I got a slide for that.
Okay.
So minor capital, we talked about cutting capital expenses, and minor capital is trucks and equipment and backhoes, etc. So in 2007, we spent about $358,000. Minor capital, 2008 was 166, 2009 was 276, 2010 was 34, 2011 71, 2012 12, 2013 0, and then some things caught up with us, 236,014. So we paid attention. And one of the things that we've learned as a staff is we operate this district like a business. Okay, so when we build a budget and our managers come to us and we ask them what they need capital-wise, and they give us a list, and then we say, no, what do you need this year? Not down the road. So we've made a lot of cuts internally, and we haven't broadcast them, and maybe we need to do that. And we may just do that so the public sees.
What was the capital expenditure on this facility here and all the,
Pardon?
on this new facility, what would it cost the water district?
I got a slide for that.
Okay.
It's right here. So Lauren was asking about the $10 million. There's been a lot of handouts about where'd the $10 million go. Well, this is where the $10 million went. Here's 2010. So that added up to the $10 million, okay? Well, 8.4 of that, or well, 3.7 of that, this was the total amount. 3.8 of that was borrowed money to build capital projects. The meter project wasn't done, and the corporation yard wasn't done. So, when we had the $10 million, almost 40% of it was money we borrowed for a specific purpose, and that was used for that purpose. The courtyard has a cost of $3.4 million, but I have a slide that I didn't bring today. It's in our budget. I've shown it before. The overall cost. The old corporation yard, if you're familiar with that. When we made the move to buy the property up here for a new facility, this cost us $750,000, and we got, I believe, a $350,000 credit, or $300,000 credit for the old corporation yard. That was a pretty good deal. We had planned on eventually building an administration building out here in front of that, and then the old AAA building came on the market. So this room you're sitting in right now, this facility and all the acreage, we purchased for $700,000, and we did $200,000 of improvements, which was mostly in this room to turn the old carport, if you're a AAA customer, into this boardroom. And now we have two pieces of property that have Clark Road frontage that have a value that we can sell whenever the board decides to sell it. So all in, it was about $2.5 million to move our people from two facilities where they weren't together into one, a facility that will last us for many, many years to come. There's a lot of employee safety issues related with that, as well as efficiency issues. So you can see that the remaining restricted, these are borrowings. When we borrow certain things, like the 2001 bond, when we did that back in the day, they require you to borrow the last year's payment and put it in a savings trust that we can't touch. It's restricted, but it still shows up on our books. So all of these are related to that, except for PFD. PFD is the Paradise Fire Hydrant Fund. You pay $1 a bill that goes into that. That's not PID's money, that's the town of Paradise's money. But we collect it and we administer that. We don't do any project, replace any hydrant, or anything without the town telling us that that's the appropriate way to spend the money. So you can see our unrestricted cash, things we had that we actually had control over, went from $4.2 million in 2010. It grew in 2011, and then it's been petering out just as our projections expected. Yeah.
Shouldn't have we been rethinking the plastic meters and stuff though, in light of the fact of the way it was going down? Shouldn't have we been rethinking last summer's new servers in light of the way it was going down?
Well, you certainly could. But
Well-
we've got a 5-board member elected.
We're gonna change that, sir.
Yeah,
We're gonna change that soon.
Yeah, and you just may. They make those decisions. The meter project, plenty of people like Lauren here don't like it. But that meter project, before we started it, we were delivering 9,000 acre feet a year out of our treatment plant. That's because there was leaks on the customer side that weren't being noticed. That's because there was water that wasn't being metered. So that project was $5 million, but $3.2 million of that was to replace 75% of the meters in our district because they were old, they weren't registering correctly, and they were wore out. So the $1.8 million is the part that the board decided to spend that made it fully automated so that we get our reads every day, so that you're allowed to use Aquahawk and have it. It allowed us to let you folks know when you have a leak. And it also took our guys off the road from walking the street every day, which had a risk to it. Yeah,
Did anybody do a cost analysis on the cost of the plastic meters as opposed to the water that we saved? In other words, would it have been cheaper just to throw away that water than it would have been to buy a $3.5 million worth of meters? Did we really lose $3.5 million worth of water to? In other words, I understand old meters had slippage, but like my meter was a fairly new meter because they'd replaced it, and I'm sure other people around town had a.
well, when you had another state mandate facing you that said you must reduce your water use by 20% by 2020, then the fines associated with that and the lack of our ability to get grant funds are all tied into that. So nobody did a specific one, no. But there's a lot of things that deal with that we've gained tons of benefit from that. We would have not made it through this drought, that's my personal opinion, had we not replaced all those meters and had the technology we had. We went down to 4,200 acre feet last year. And yeah, a ton of that was because you folks conserved. But that 36% came off of 7,000 acre feet, not 9. We can argue all day, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm just saying though, isn't that your job as a general manager to make those kind of decisions that, because see, I could get better fuel mileage if I bought a new pickup, but I'd be out 45,000 and that thing would never pay back for the fuel that I saved. And that's what I'm talking about when we buy these meters and stuff, is the cost buyback is not there that I can see. I've never seen a figure yet that you put up, or that any of the board members have ever put up that shows me where I can say these meters are actually beneficial to the customer because it actually saved us money. Because it hasn't. It just hasn't. I mean, you're how many years have the meters been in, sir?
About 7.
And we owe $4.5 million on them yet at 4.5% interest. So, and they're wearing out at the rate of 2 or 3 a day now, and we know that's going to get worse.
You're throwing out all kinds of numbers that I'm not going to sit here and say they're correct or they're not correct, but you're throwing out numbers, and that's a lot of them that's going on around here. Is numbers are getting thrown out.
That's why I'm asking you, sir, because you're the general manager, you're supposed to know this stuff.
Yeah.
How much money was saved because these meters don't have to be read by personnel coming by and checking? Is that
What cost?
into the equation?
It was in the initial equation. It
Yes.
was, but we also extended more services to our customers, so we didn't actually lose the person that we thought we were going to when we went to this. But that was a decision made by the board. Yes?
What's the annual maintenance cost on the smart meters? What is the cost to keep them operating after the initial?
I had that number, and I don't want to quote it. Just so you know, we pay a service that collects the data and sends it to us daily. There's Aquahawk on top of that, which is about $1,000. It's about 10 cents a meter. So that's about $12,000 a year. So there is costs associated with that.
How about like replacement of the ones that go bad? Is that very much? Or?
It's about $125.
A piece?
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
a lot of them? Or?
We've had quite a few. We haven't fared as bad as other agencies. The company that we went with had a deal, had a contract with a company to provide batteries from Malaysia. Turns out they were bad batteries. That wasn't the big problem. The big problem was when they had to warranty them, they had to pay a company $60 to reprogram the new Firefly, and it made that company go bankrupt. So we have service with a new company. Our warranty's not any good. We've gotten 6-7 years out of those batteries that had a 10-year life. We've had a couple hundred a month go a couple months ago. So it's an issue. Yep.
What's the life expectancy of these meters? Life expectancy.
Meters are 20 years generally. They always end up being a lot longer before you replace them. The Fireflies, they had a warranty that went gone with the bankruptcy, but the batteries had a 10-year supposed life. Let's talk about employees. No matter what I do, I can't get this to be a clear picture. because I switched it from the last time thinking I would, but when you get it on the screen, it's not. But we have a group of, different groups of employees, so we start with our customers. You guys elect the board. The board makes decisions. They hire me, contrary to what some people may think. I work for the board of directors, so they make the decisions on policies, budgets, expenses, projects we move forward with. The ones in gray are our management unit. If you look at our management unit for how many people there supervising, we pretty much have one manager and one backup in each area. We've got, this is our customer service, including our meter folks. This is our treatment plant. We operate that treatment plant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. What we've been discussing with the union for the general unit is how to get through this, or how to soften the blow is probably a better word. So we are proposing the elimination, not the elimination, but we have 3 vacant positions right now, so keeping them vacant another year. And then we usually hire 5 temporary employees to help us replace pipeline and do road work in the summer, and we would not hire them this year. That's about $320,000 plus or minus savings annually. We're working with them to make that happen. And that's why you saw that jump when I showed you the operating cost of 7%. Because right now the assumption is in 2017 those positions get refilled. A lot of discussion about pay. Someone asked, go ahead.
I just want to ask the meter reader part, when we put in the plastic meters, were we able to lay anybody off currently that was on that, or anybody in the office, because Texas is doing the bookkeeping on the plastic meters?
They're not doing the bookkeeping, they're
They're
just
doing
giving
it.
us the reads.
Yeah, they're doing the reads.
Ultimately, no, we didn't.
We didn't lay nobody off?
No.
Okay.
A lot of talk about pay here. Want to cover that and answer any questions. But the main thing is when you look at pay, it's every person that looks at it can come away with something different. We've got a 5-member board of directors. One of their charges is dealing with employee negotiations. The employee groups will give you data that shows you that they're underpaid. The public will give you data that shows you that they're overpaid. And this board has to somehow come to a reasonable middle. If you go back for the last 20 years, average COLA is less than 3%, because as long as I've been here, and for quite a years, 3 years before that, the COLA's never been more than 3%, and then there's been years where they got none. Going forward, like I told you, it's tied to Social Security, so no Social Security change, no general COLA for employees. So you got South Feather Water and Power, average wage 89. You asked what it was here, 55,000. Thermalito, smaller agency in Orville, 37. City Chico, 65. Down Paradise, 47. Bella Vista, I put them up there. They're all the way up in Redding, but they're a surface water treatment district of similar size to us, a little bit smaller. Surface water treatment has a whole different animal than when you are pumping water out of wells and delivering it to customers. But I tell you to do your homework. One thing to pay attention to is retirement. A lot of people are under the assumption that PID is in the same boat as the town, school district, etc. PID is not in PERS. We have no pension plan at PID. We have a 401k style retirement. So every time we meet payroll, we meet our retirement obligations. You may have seen the article in the Post a month ago or so. The school district here is facing this PERS increase where their obligations $200,000 this year, but in 5 years it's going to be over $1 million. That's not the case here at PID. When we make payroll, we meet our obligation. But here's a website. Our pay is out there for anyone to look up. State of California directed this website. We have to report it every year. So you can go take a look, see what other water districts are paying, see what other agencies are paying. There's another one called transparentcalifornia.com. They do a similar thing. They do it through a public information request, and we've given them the information that they requested. So they're not affiliated with the state government, and they do their own check. Yes?
I have a question. I looked on the website and, this kind of ties with what you're talking about. Is there a water rate analysis and study anywhere on the PID website?
It's the cost of service study,
Um,
and it was more related to the last
Yeah.
rate proposal.
and when was that done, do you recall?
Yeah, that was done, and it was out last December.
Yeah.
So there's like a current one now?
For this current one, no, there's not.
'Cause
This
I
one?
was, what you're talking about, to look at each of these things, that takes a lot of time. And I did come across one of these water rate analysis studies for Rio Alto
Mhm.
Water District. It was as recent as February of 2016. And it's very inclusive. It like compares 9 different districts within their area. And it's really helpful to be able to look at all that information in one place and trying to look each one up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for all of us in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at operating and non-operating expenses of the district's water system. And their goal is to achieve, financial sustainability
Mm-hmm.
and propose a fair rate and that's reasonable to the district's customers. And this is like a 27-page document, so they do a lot of research. It was a third-party company out of Berkeley that did this one called Bartle Wells Associates.
Mhm.
It seemed really valuable, with somebody from the outside looking at all of the pieces and putting it together.
Mhm. That would be an option for the board. The one I did for the last rate proposal that was protested, it is available online. I did it myself. Saved the district probably $60,000 to $100,000. That's what they probably paid for that. So this time around, it's a more simple calculation. And I can kind of explain it, but it's one service charge and one quantity charge. So it's pretty straightforward. But we don't have a current one. Our budgets are available. That cost service is available. There's lots of information available.
Directly related to a rate increase and looking at all the pieces. Don't have time to go into it there.
Fair enough. Mhm. Yeah.
As the general manager, have you given, and in light of the fact that we had PID employees working on the new warehouse over here for a while, have you given any thought, do you have any suggestions about how many folks you could lay off and not do pipeline repairs such as you did when you were building the building over there for a while in light of the tight budget? Have you tried to come up with any sort of numbers, the amount of people you could lay off and still operate the PID?
Well,
Besides the ones that are just temporary and they're already gone, you're just not gonna bring it back. I mean, can you
Well,
kind of
there's-
that
there-
to
there's-
some guys?
there's 3 full-time positions that are vacant, that'll stay vacant. And then you add that to a person on FMLA, another person that's going into a workers' comp surgery. We will be doing very little, if no pipeline. The only pipeline project we're proposing to look at in this year is the town of Paradise is doing an overlay on Pearson Road. And there's a couple sections in there that we want to replace before they put a new road on it. Seems like that would make sense. But it gets back to the question of what's appropriate. We barely have enough to put a crew together for a pipeline. And then when you split them up to do leak repairs, we have about 2. To be able to do pipeline, we're going to bring in the warehouseman, we're going to bring in the mechanic at times to help. We're about as bare bones as you can get. You lay people off, and then you have an emergency and you wish you didn't. You got to remember, when things happen, we need to be able to respond. And that's part of it. And when you lay someone off, they're gone for good. and their cost isn't gone for good. We're self-paying for unemployment. It's served us well in the past, but we would be paying the full unemployment rate for everybody we lay off, so that cuts into the savings. And then we've invested training and getting these guys up to speed, and so they're productive. And then if you lay them off, you're going to start at square one again. So that's a decision that can be made, but that's my justification.
As a follow-up to that, not to cut you off, did you have anything else?
Go ahead.
As a follow-up to that, have you considered, as a general manager of PID, have you considered putting Pearson Road out for bids to see if your guys can actually do it cheaper? I mean, so that we have a salvage figure? Because a lot of people in the public have asked me and discussed with me, and I'm sure several other people, that this project at the first of Pearson Road was kind of appearing to be rambling on, and also the one just down off of Nunley and Sawmill, where you replaced that line in there. That took several weeks, and the man at the end of the street, he's a backhoe operator who does septic tanks in town, and he said that job, he could have done it in half the time. So I'm just wondering if you've done a cost analysis of doing PID workers doing Pearson Road, as opposed to just putting it out for contract and having it banged out, and that's it.
We haven't done it for Pearson Road because we have an employee contract. We'd have to work that out. But we've analyzed it in the past when we were in negotiations with employees, when it's the right time to decide what size you should be.
Could you consider that, sir?
We've done it before. What we found was we have to pay prevailing wage for every job. Okay, so prevailing wage for signage, operators, etc. There's a profit in there for the contractor. It didn't pencil out at the time.
Never will.
It's
What's the cost of our backhoe operators? Aren't they around about $80,000? And isn't that pretty much prevailing wage?
it's a mix and match.
Well, Mr. Hunt, I really personally appreciate, the length I've been here and, the generality of, this presentation and everything. I mean, I'm sincere about that. I don't feel that way about the board necessarily, but I do about you and what you're trying to do. But I'll tell you, the reality for me is that we're here trying to figure out what, there is an appropriate rate structure, that we not only can afford but don't deserve to have to be charged. Okay, no matter what your situation is with maintaining the system and trucks and the physical property and everything. I mean, the fact is, this lady with the mean and everything, that's basically what I was trying to get back to. We lived on a given budget that, before or with the drought situation and everything, that did everything that you needed to do, okay? I mean, it took care of everything. It took care of payroll, took care of physical plant, took care of everything, all right? Now, we're being forced into a situation with expenditures of funds for something that maybe doesn't have to be, at the cost that it is, okay? Because there are alternatives, and there are other water districts in this state that are probably dealing with the same thing, and I really want to know how the hell this project was slated for this location, this city, and why the rest of it won't take some look at some other option. I want to know what the other options are. And so I'm going to go to the wetlands now even, that I understand that there are only two chemistry items that, the 218 is really concerned about and everything, or that we had a problem with, one of which is aluminum, and there's an electrolysis factor and everything on the ions of aluminum or soap, and we also have an organic chemistry element that's in there, like poison or something, okay? I mean, if that's the only thing holding back the wetlands and everything, there's a way some other district is solving the problem and everything, that's what I want. I don't want this water plant that costs $16 million when I can experiment with $3 million even, $3 million even, on a wetlands project and see that it works.
Okay.
And gives us good water.
I hear you. We'll get there.
I'm sorry, it said 47 employees and you said 37 employees before. I was just curious what the difference was.
That included all our temporaries, and it includes board members.
So you're including that in the average wage?
Well, that's what they asked. I mean, that's the state's numbers.
It's not really an accurate
No.
representation?
Not that mark, no.
The 47 or 55?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is comparing apples with apples in the other districts.
That's what the state was trying to do when they put it out there. So here's the rate structure, it's simplified rate plan. I talked about it earlier. We're breaking out the debt so you know exactly what it is, and if we negotiate it lower, then it'll be lower. Reserving is here. Service charge is a part of our cost of doing business. Now keep in mind that at the hearing, and this gentleman, it seems like he wants to proceed with that, there was $2.20 per month added for 1 year to fund a wetland study. And we'll talk about the wetlands here in a minute. And then each unit is $1.53. One of the constraints of Proposition 218 currently is we can't have a low income rate. So I recognize, talking to a lot of people, coming to the counter, etc. You folks that are on the A rate, that are paying $22.95 now, it's a big hit for you, and we understand that. But the law doesn't allow us to provide a low income rate when we change rates.
Because of the debt, figure.
No.
No,
No?
it's 218.
Okay.
Part of it, but this is our current debt. Yeah.
You keep saying a low income rate, but in fact, the alternate rate that we have in place now is called a low usage rate.
Yeah.
Not low income. It's for people who use less than 85 units a year.
Yeah.
And that is totally divorced from income.
I'm with you.
Why can't we still have a rate like that? Because I've calculated the new service charge for someone under the old rate who used to get a monthly charge of $22.95 and 8 units for 75 cents. And taking that same number of units under the new rate, they're going to incur a 47% increase. And I don't understand why the board and you, sir, continue to say you can't do a low income, when that was not a low income rate.
Okay. The flip side is we can't do a low user rate either, nor can we have conservation rates, because the law says you have to, you can't charge more than the proportional cost of providing service to the parcel, okay?
Yes, I understand.
So when you use less water, does it cost us less to serve you? It doesn't. And so,
Well, giving that person less water, I would think that it does cost you less.
Should.
we're lucky to have a system where it's mostly all gravity. But 97% of our costs are fixed, whether we deliver 2 million gallons of water a day or 8 million gallons of water a day. The costs are fixed. And that's what Prop 218 talks about, is the cost of providing service.
Well, I have that paragraph right here about proportionality from Prop 218. However, Prop 218 went into effect in the 90s, right? And so all of this time, we've had the low usage rate. Why suddenly are we not allowed to have it, when 218's been around for years and years?
That's a great question.
We want a new water plan.
Prop 218 was a constitutional amendment, and it says what it says. But what happens is, over the years, people challenge the rates their district imposed. And it goes to a court. And the court makes a decision, and that changes how we have to interpret that original 1992 rule. So the more court cases we've had to deal with, the more restrictive we have been in our choices. So while we could get away with it in 2011, the reality is we've had a court case that was very specific about conservation rates and very specific about proportionality. So we would have to prove that it costs us less to serve you. And currently we can't. But keep in mind, we've kind of been in this role of, we don't have a lot of time, so we roll this rate out that sets a ceiling, okay? And that ceiling governs what we can deal with now. But I am planning on working with the board to do this process again in the fall. And folks like you that have been impacted very highly, the board could decide that this should be closer to $25. But that would make this, I have a slide, but that increases this. So it would serve what you're trying to accomplish. But under today's issue, we're stuck with it. We can't make that flip.
And I'm not just saying it for me personally, because actually,
I mean
before
folks like you.
conservation, I wasn't a low usage
Yeah.
customer, but.
Yeah.
Why couldn't we make the assumption that the wetlands would work, or that we, as your lawyer stated in a director's meeting, that he thought he could prevail on challenging the fact that we even need a filtering system such as this $16 million. He stated in an open session that if you turn him loose, that he felt like he could prevail on that, and we could save that $16 million anyway. But in lieu of that, if we didn't do that, why wouldn't it make more sense for you as a manager to say, let's do everything we can to make the wetland, because if we spend $5 million on a wetland and it fails in 5 years, that would be less than the interest on your $16 million project.
Right.
And the centrifugal wouldn't be wearing out in 7 years, such as the manufacturer says it is. And so why wouldn't that behoove you as a general manager to look out for us and to make a cost analysis figure that would be more representative of reality of Paradise, and thereby we wouldn't have such a rate increase in 2018.
Right, he's got the point.
Why wouldn't that happen? Why isn't that your job?
I'll challenge you on one thing. I am looking out for you. Whether you like how I'm looking out for you or not, can be debated. And we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Let's talk about a comparison, and we'll try and get this out. You talked about a comparison of local agencies in that study. We've done that, and we'll try to get this out to the public as much. This is PID's new proposed rate right here. All of our local other water providers are all private water companies. They are not constrained by Prop 218. They operate under the Public Utilities Commission. Every one of them have a profit built into them, and every one have a process for setting rates where the public gets to talk about it, but at the end of the day, the PUC decides what's the appropriate rate. So here's our local agencies. That's Cal Water Chico. They still will remain lower for lower users. They're well water. They have a lot more customers. It's easier to spread the cost of doing business over many more customers. So here's we are. This is Del Oro Lime Saddle, Del Oro Pines, and this is Cal Water Oroville. So, yeah.
This is, I don't know, just how could we possibly raise the cost to Southern California? I mean, we live in this small town in Northern California. We surely only use a small portion of the water that flows through here. Can we, pass the cost on to them? If I lived in Southern California, I'd expect my water rates to be a lot higher because I understand it has to come over distance. Is that?
Well, the only way we can do that is if we decided to sell some of our water.
So we don't sell any
So
water?
we're all locally controlled. We've got 12,300 acre feet of storage, and we now use 5,000 to 6,000 acre feet of that a year. We have to operate and maintain a dam, 2 dams, a treatment plant facility. The reality is the costs are the costs. We can't pass them on to anybody. All we can do is do our best to try and get grants, which we're trying to do, to offset some of these costs, and we're working on that. But there's not any help straight rate wise.
Does the present water treatment plant, is it compatible with 218? I mean, I'm just curious. That is, Does it, I mean, it's,
218 only relates to setting rates.
okay, well, we know what the cause of the rate increases are then, and, you know, I say because we're incurring other debt with, you know, this proposed water plant and everything, but we've got a water plant that is functioning, so what's wrong with it?
I'll explain that. I got one more slide, and then we'll talk about those. Impacts to seniors. One of the changes in this rates, that another thing we can't justify, is right now we have multifamily rates, where the number of equivalent dwelling units you have drives what your monthly service charge is. That is going away, and those facilities will turn into businesses. Business rates, they'll pay based on meter size and consumption. So of the 157 accounts we have, 124 of them are going to see a reduction. So a lot of your mobile home parks, etc., where we've got seniors living, we can't control what their landlord charges, but their cost of water is going down. Okay, let's talk about the wetlands. We spent $35,000 on consultants to evaluate wetlands, okay? Maybe that's not enough for some folks, but it hasn't been completely ignored. One thing everyone has to understand, the wetlands will require a continued NPDES permit. And that's an NPDES permit at the levels that we have to reach at the end game, not our current levels that are set for us. The NPDES permits program is a federal program that is administered by the state of California. So the federal government sets the standards of what can be in waters that you're discharging. And then the state uses those standards, and they're the ones that administer the permits. So this isn't a state mandate, because they're just doing what the federal government tells them they have to do. These constituents that are allowed in that discharge water, they're changing all the time. They're always evaluating whether to add new chemicals that we may or may not meet. They're always lowering the amount that they're allowing in the water. So the aluminum has gone down over time. The dichlorobromomethane allowed amount has gone down over time. And so what this board decided, looking at all the facts, is do we want to spend some money and risk that long-term exposure? They have history. If you've ever been to our treatment plant, there's a big circle in the middle of it. You can kind of see it when you're driving over the dam. That was the first water treatment plant for PID. It was $1.5 million, and it was built when the staff and the whole water world knew that the surface water treatment rule was coming down the pipe, that you were going to have to treat surface water before you deliver it to your customer. And at the time, the board at the time decided to do the cheaper alternative. And they spent $1.5 million for a treatment plant that only treated water in the winter. That got them 9 years before we had a brand new treatment plant that cost $14 million. We just paid that $1.5 million off a couple of years ago.
So our water plant presently satisfies all of the state and the federal requirements as far as purification and everything, right?
It 100% supplies the drinking water side, yes.
Okay. Now, am I understanding now that according to Mr. Kellogg, even that he says that the federal government says that, or the EPA, I'm sorry, you know, there's so many entities, you don't know who you're talking about and who you're talking with. He said that there are two elements or he said those two elements at the levels in the wetlands or our water meets EPA standards below. Now, I understand you saying that those chemistry levels could change and everything over time.
They don't currently. We've had exceedances.
But well, isn't that so much more positive about the whole thing then? I mean, you know, let's say in favor of the wetlands, and I'm not absolute wetlands necessarily just because of wetlands, but I just don't like the money picture on the other side of it and everything.
We don't like it either.
Yeah.
Trust me.
you know, and you're not gonna have anything to say about it either. I mean, unfortunately, you know, even if you were in favor of it, because we've elected these people, I wanna know who's appointed and who's,
Well, there's 5 members elected, and they're elected to make decisions.
Who's-
Let me go back to square one. So here's our treatment plant, okay? Now, we're treating water for our customers, and that means we're clarifying the water through a clarifier, and then we're filtering the water through a filter. And those two processes collect dirt that we get out of the raw water. We put chemicals in, aluminum's part of that, that gets the dirt particles to connect together so that they can be filtered out. Now we have to flush the clarifiers and we have to backwash the filters. So what happens now, currently, is when we do that, that water, which is called processed water, comes up to these 2 ponds. There's one here and one right here. And it settles out most of the dirt, and then that water is released into Magilla. So what we're talking about is we have an NPDES permit, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, that allows us to release that water as long as it's under all of these levels. Well, what's happened is the aluminum and dichlorobromine numbers that were required to were dropping, and we couldn't meet them. So the board told the State Water Quality Control Board, well, we are going to no longer discharge. We're going to build a project so that we don't have to discharge that anymore because of all the things I talked about. Constituents changing, rules changing, a lot of risks. The first time we talked about that, it was $2 to $3 million. That's what we thought back in 2011 was the extent of our solution. Well, when you start taking in, really digging into the problem, what's happened is to not discharge, we have to deal with rainwater, which is a big one, about 9 inches over the weekend. That's an issue. Our ponds certainly wouldn't have handled that. And then the other thing is changing seasons. Okay, so what happens is when we go into the fall and everyone's irrigation's running and we have that first downpour. Well, we've helped all of you folks and educated you that when it's raining, we need to turn our outdoor irrigation off. So we go from 9 or 10 million gallons a day to 3. And we have to wash all those clarifiers and flush all those filters. Well, when you recycle that water, you're only supposed to recycle 10% of the total amount coming into the plant. So now we're constrained with, we got a bunch of water and we can only get rid of it or replenish it, or at 10% maximum. So then we found out we need storage tanks to be able to make this happen. That came into the picture. The earlier technology we talked about was just rehabbing our ponds so that the water would be a little maintained better and a little cleaner, and then we could just bring it to the headworks of the plant. That doesn't work because we got rainfall issues that stir up the turbidity. We've got storage issues. So when you start digging into all the problems we face to be able to say to the state we're not going to discharge, the price continued to creep. There's folks, and even the State Water Board staff, they asked me, we're looking at other solutions. There's lots of treatment plants trying to do this same thing for the same reasons. Their costs aren't as high as us. Well, it's because of our topography. We're in a small site, lots of hills. We don't have a lot of space. There's wetlands that are working on wastewater treatment plants. They could possibly be a solution for a water treatment plant. But generally they have a lot of land and a lot of area. We're talking about what's proposed by Director Kellogg is this area right here. That's about 10 acres. And what we hear and what the majority of the board heard is that may be a solution for a while, but generally when you have a wetland, you have another spot a second spot of 5 to 10 acres or whatever it's calculated to take, so that when this one starts not being able to take aluminum anymore and not solving your problems, then you get to start a new one and then you rehab the one you were using. So that's a problem when you don't have a lot of space. Another concern that hasn't been discussed or brought out a lot, this is a 3D view. So here's those ponds we were talking about. And what I was talking about is 10 acres, which is this area right here. It's pretty steep. And so the first thing that would happen if we went forward with the wet sand solution is you're going to clear cut 10 acres. This is Skyway. This is the view on Skyway. I know there's a lot of wetlands proponents, but I know there's a whole lot of other people that when you tell them you're going to clear cut 10 acres of forest in view, they're not going to be happy with that. Yeah.
How do you equate that to taking out the Monterey cypress that's protected where you want to put the 2 big tanks in, and you're dealing with serpentine, which is the California rock, but it's also the one that asbestos comes from. How do you justify those 2 things in for the filter plant? Because there's going to be lots of people that ain't going to want those Monterey cypresses ripped out of there either along Skyway.
They're not Monterey cypress, they're McNabb cypress. McNabb cypress is a species of interest and it grows in serpentine. So this is how we're going to deal with it, just so you know. There's a few that'll be taken out. Not all of them you see at the plant will be taken out. Some of them will be preserved. And we also have some on our property up here. So we are going to assure that if we have to take any out, that we preserve some here and we preserve some up there. And if any of the things in their ecosystem that there's McNabb cypress, and if they're in a certain state or whatever, there's things that grow around them. We're looking into that. And so our impact will be offset by preserving some here and preserving some up here.
That's if the state okays it. That's not something you can do without the state's okay, though, from my understanding of the people that work at the plant. That has to be okay through the state that you set aside this other piece of land at the end of this.
It has to be okay through the CEQA process.
Yes, and so that's not a given that we can do that either. That's
not a given, but it's pretty common practice. Pretty common practice. And as far as working asbestos, when we did the Magalia bypass, many of you may not have noticed it, but we now have a bypass pipe and a diversion up here that brings water to the treatment plant, so that if we have a tanker truck fall over here, we actually have a way to continue to give you safe drinking water. We dealt with asbestos right here. There's protocols, there's tests, it's just something you deal with. It can be managed, we manage it here, and we'll be able to manage it there.
Pretty smart.
So, thank you. Yes,
Very
sir.
smart.
One of the wetlands that's proposed on that 10 acres, that also has to be leveled, doesn't it?
Or at least terraced.
Terrace.
Yeah, at least terraced.
And
And
that's
then,
a pretty good chunk that you're flattening out.
it's a lot of work. Okay. And that's, I mean, the $300,000 is intended to give you a true number, because the numbers we're hearing now, they're not from an engineer or any true study. So that, these are the things the board considered when they make these decisions of going forward. Everybody would like a cheaper project, but sometimes you just can't do it that way. Yes.
Well, the other thing is I was here at the board meeting when the California Water Board person was here, and they said if you make an honest effort, this is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but they said if you make an honest effort to rectify the problem that you have, we'll give you 5 years basically on limit. We'll basically just give you 5 years without hardly even asking for it, as long as you're making a good faith effort. And a good faith effort to me would be looking into this constructed wetlands, because it'd be a lot cheaper for the ratepayers. And let's just say at the end of it didn't work out, it would, I believe, and I believe I can pencil it out and show it to you, that it would be cheaper on the ratepayers to pay that and write it off as a failure, such as that $1.5 million tank, that made 9 years, it would be cheaper than
Right.
floating the $14 million plan at that time.
Right,
So the ratepayers would have been ahead of the
Right.
game, and they would be ahead of the game
Right.
on the constructed wetlands, if indeed the state went along with the idea to
Right.
try to make it work, and then if it, let's say it plugged up in 5 years or
Right.
6 years or something, and we hadn't abandoned it,
right,
the cost would be less to the ratepayers for that to be an 8-year
Exactly.
failure than it would be for if we put in $16 million now and had a piece of mechanical machinery that the manufacturer themselves said it was gonna wear out in 7 years and need maintenance. Now, I realize that machine is not all the $16 million, I truly realize that. But still in all, that, something's gotta happen to that, and I was talking to the plant the other day, and now they're not even talking about a centrifugal no more. They're talking about a screw press. So now we've graduated from a centrifugal, which we did all the engineering on. We paid $700,000 or something for this plant, and now we're going to a screw press, and that's different yet. And so I'm just saying, wouldn't it you, sir, as a general manager, are tasked with the fact of operating this thing as economically as you can
Right.
for the amount you get out of it,
right.
for the benefits of the public. And I'm just saying, don't you think that maybe if you could do the wetland, even if you truly thought in your mind, wait a minute, this thing's probably gonna plug up in 7, 8 years, we're probably gonna have to just abandon it.
Right.
Wouldn't you think that it would be better for the public? Because they get 7, 8 years of way lower rates than what you're proposing now, just simply by doing that project.
He does, but he doesn't vote. He can't vote on this thing.
I mean.
Well, we're gonna change the board, and that's all gonna change, so that's why I'm asking you. I'm asking you for your guidance on the thing.
Let me clarify a few things.
Be a fun
You
project.
threw a lot of them out there. Your position right now is based on what, a $2 to $3 million estimate?
No, I have
That's
no
what it's
idea what it
gonna
is.
be.
I have no idea really what it is. That's why the 300,000 is a wise investment. It's not just a jump ball.
And that'll be.
Because that's less than the interest on your project, sir.
If we have to go to the private market, yeah, but if we don't, probably not. We've got a permit we have to deal with. Our 5 years already started in 2013, and it ends in 2018. And if you were at the last meeting where the state came, they said, you may get 2 more years on that, but don't expect it, because it never really happened. Let me finish. So we're faced with that. We're faced with them believing we're making good progress, okay? So if they think that the wetlands is good progress, then we'll be okay. I'm not sure that if we continued stopping everything and went down a wetlands path before we started making a decision, I think we'd be in trouble.
Send in that tape.
So, and clarifying my position. I'm the general manager. I work with the board. I provide them my input and I provide them my guidance, but ultimately they make the decision. And if you're asking personally me, that wetland is not going to cost $2 to $3 million. It's probably going to cost $7 to $8 million. One. Two, I don't think we have a community that is willing to support removal of 10 acres of forest, personally. Living here since I was 4, that is not something people are happy about. And lastly, we are working with your folks' money. So when we gamble, and I don't agree with you that $1.5 million was well spent, maybe it would pencil out. But if we did, if we went your path, let's say it cost $5 million, okay, instead of 15, and we got 5 years out of it. Well, this $15 million project, do you think it's going to be $15 million in 5 years? It's going to be 20.
I don't think it's going to be 15 million now. You done said it started out a few years back at 2 million, it's already to 16 million, and we haven't laid a pound of concrete on the ground. So no, I don't think it's going to be 16 million.
We won't know the true cost, but if you look at that estimate, it has contingencies in it for how far it's been designed. So there's a big chunk of contingency that gets it to that point. Yes? Go ahead, Amy.
I was wondering, that's very steep, right? So what are you gonna do, pump it up there, and is that already PID's land?
It is our land. We wouldn't have to purchase any land.
Okay.
So we would have to pump it up there.
How about some of those spot areas up there where there's barren and everything, even if it were multi, even if there were more than one or two or three or whatever?
We don't own this up here.
Okay, who did, well, I mean, you
It's
know.
private.
But there's another piece down there, further, about
Yeah.
halfway through the layer.
That's a small piece. And one thing I forgot to point out, somewhere right in here, Greg Zobbs can tell you, there's a bald eagle nest. And that's a whole other.
So you won't pass SEPA. You will never
No.
pass SEPA then.
Know it that well.
But I
Good.
also am opposed to having forest material put in there and then digging it up and sending it to the landfill and buying more and putting it in there and digging it up and
Enough of it.
taking it to the landfill. I mean, that's gonna cost a lot of money over time, I would imagine, and then we've got a lot of electricity to pump that water up that hill, and it just doesn't seem like it's gonna pencil out.
And do you think interest rates are gonna be the same what they are today in 5 years? Not if the Feds have anything to say about it.
History wouldn't
Well,
prove that out.
we're gonna be-
Yes, sir.
For those who've had experience in engineering and so on, projects, Murphy's Law kind of comes into play. Okay, and me that it's not, it should be considered that additional problems, additional unexpected situations will most likely happen or can happen, okay? And so when we start talking about doing a treatment plan up front, okay, we might have to consider that, well, how can that expand into further problems, okay? And doing the wetland situation does gain some time, and that time might produce better engineering and better thoughts on this whole treatment plant idea in the future, okay? And so it's kind of a weighing it like this, but for those who've had the experience in engineering and knowing the projects, okay, it's something that you eventually come to know Murphy's Law in a way that you can't begin to describe, okay? And so I'm just saying this is an argument. And then you talk about the forest, losing some forest. Consider the fact that, forest fires, okay?
Mhm.
We lose a lot of forest to do with forest fires, okay? So when people cut down trees and so on, we lose them that way, but at the same time, we lose trees to forest fires and so on. So it's not always necessarily only a one-way with no consideration.
And I'm just putting it out there. that-
So
that
anyway,
happens.
but I think, and this business of treatment plants and so on, given it some time, how much more improved engineering will take place as well in this situation, okay? And so I kind of think there is some worthiness to the idea of a treatment, the wetlands, okay? We're looking at, I'm just changing the subject just a little bit, but we're looking at cancer, okay, and what might be taking place with regards to some serious abilities to deal with cancer, okay? Well, just think of the whole industry, hospitals and so on and everything, who are dealing with cancer in the way it is done now. This would be a wonderful thing if we end up with some serious, inexpensive ways of dealing with cancer. Well, what happens to all this capability today? Okay? So this is just kind of argument. I think the wetlands is something worthy of consideration. Okay, and gaining that time and recognizing that the treatment plant might end up with some serious problems that we don't know about yet, that in time would come out through other locations. Thank you.
On the wetlands project, okay, if you do that, there's got to be a maintenance cost on that versus, being out in the elements and everything else, there's got to be constant maintenance on it. So is there, versus having a plant? I'm not asking for the question, I'm just throwing that out.
And I'm no expert. We have one guy right in that, you may have it comes to where you may have to rebuild it, it's probably the biggest thing.
Well, you might be possibly have to hire more people to maintain it, too. I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know.
Are you aware of his last letter where he corrected himself on the first letter that he sent you, this engineer that was from Chico State? Have you seen the last letter? You're aware that he said now that it's a feasible project, he feels like it's a feasible project, given the 6 acres and given the facts that he knows them as they are now, one. And two is, have you done any thought about, I'm told these tanks that you want to put in for this treatment thing is going to be 58 feet in diameter? Is that 58 foot in diameter and 24 foot tall is what I thought I read on the plans, but I'm not a plan engineer, so I might be wrong there. The third thing, and then I'll stop for somebody else, is there any sort of a guarantee anywhere that if you build this plant to these specs today, that plant won't be won't be obsolete in 5 years and we'll be building a new one? In other words, you said yourself the state keeps making stricter and stricter rules, so if we build this on time, on budget, and it comes in at $16 million, is there any guarantee of how long we're going to be able to operate that plant before we got to spend more money up there? So if there's not, then there's no guarantee on the wetland either, and it's definitely a cheaper project. So
Well, that's yet to be known. Yes, sir.
In your opinion, is the wetland capable of doing what we need it to do to actually clean that water?
I've read mixed results.
one does now.
Maybe not.
One does now. You can go see it. It's up by Cottonwood. They just fired it up.
It takes aluminum.
Yeah. The 2 of the board members were there a week ago and walked through.
Where was that? Cottonwood?
Yeah, it's
Which board member?
Back to the soil up there where the wetlands might be built. Isn't it a lot of rock
it's
Probably.
what's the name of
to
that
cope
road?
with?
Yeah.
Building these ponds in rock is not going to be an inexpensive project.
No, and if you're meeting state requirements, even for a wetland, you have to make sure they don't leak. So that's all part of what would have to be evaluated in the study. And the other thing is if they don't work, they may not work because of a rainstorm or something like that. We are exposed to $10,000 per day fines, plus
Yes.
I
Wait,
think it's $3,000.
$10,000 per day fine?
Yeah.
Not relating to the wetlands we talked about, or we talked about the parallel now of the physical plant down here?
No, the wetlands.
I'm talking about the wetlands.
No, we're subject
If
to
they don't-
$10,000 a day on the wetlands?
If they don't do what they're supposed to do. Or if we have a maintenance issue with them, or if we get 10 inches of rain and it doesn't discharge where it's supposed to.
Okay, I thought would be separate from that because the fining would be done on the plant, the water plant, not the wetlands, but would be subject to that if the,
Anytime we're discharging
okay,
and we don't meet the requirements of the discharge, we're
okay,
subject to $10,000 per day fines.
okay,
And so with the wetlands, you have to maintain that permit, and that's where your exposure is.
okay.
But that discharge is at the end of the wetland, so if we just put up a simple board dam there and held it back, there is no discharge. And the other thing is, what if our centrifugal blows up that's running at about 25,000 RPM there at the plant, and you can't filter through it, and we have a discharge there? We're still subject to fines no matter which way you go, it doesn't matter. If we have a mechanical breakdown on one.
Let me clarify
We don't
a little bit. The centrifuge you talked about,
Yes, sir.
that we're looking at a screw press, that's the last part of the process. So I'll get into a little bit how it works. So what the proposal mechanical is it gets pumped up to basically a second treatment plant that treats this water. And it's treated through inclined plate settlers. So we encourage that dirt to connect again on this new water to settle that dirt out and clarify it before it gets returned back to the treatment plant. That dirt gets collected and brought down to a spot in here, and then that dirt, we get the water out of it as much as we can, and then it goes through the screw press, and the screw press separates the water from the dirt. So you end up with the dirt, which is what you need to transport out to the landfill.
Which is just damp at that point.
It's the last step of the
Yeah,
whole
they got
process.
they got 3 or 4 buckets of treatment plant, if anybody wants to see that.
So the plant itself has redundancy. The side treatment plant's got multiple strains, so it's got two things that can work. We got double tanks. Yes, we would only have one screw press, but we're only expected to do the screw press once a week, maybe, where we would have to operate that equipment. So if it does fail, we got time to come in and have to fix it before we need it.
Well, that brings the question, how often do you back wash the filters? And isn't there a period in between it? So in other words, if you back wash the filters and it went to the centrifugal and the screw plant, it wouldn't be going 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But that's the same as the water wouldn't be going to the constructed wetlands that much either. In other words, it isn't a steady stream of water 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's when you backwash, that's the water we're talking about. We're talking much the same for folks in here as backwashing your sand swimming pool filter. We're talking about that water out of that filter. We're not talking about your whole swimming pool.
Where do you take it, by the way? The volumes of sediment and everything?
Neil Road landfill.
What, who's landfill?
Neil Road
Neil Road?
landfill,
Okay.
Buchanan landfill. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody's got their, thing here. We kind of came here to find out what our rates are. Now we got a new rate, and I know this is all incorporated into the rates.
Yeah.
But I think we're kind of, I feel like we're kind of getting off track as far as in the weeds too much.
Well,
I want to know,
I mean-
my question is,
Yeah.
my question, I understand all that, but we have the first rate increase that was proposed. Not very many people are happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
And we now have, and one of the things that I felt was inherently unfair about that was we were going to be required to pay for water we didn't use, and instead of rolling it over. And I think if it had been able to have been rolled over month to month, I don't think there would have been as much opposition. You pay for 96 units of water, you should be able to receive 96. Now the second rate we have now, we're paying more than the rate than your first proposal. And that's where,
Depends on who you are.
well, if I run my figures, you gotta go to say, if I use the same amount of water in 2016 as I did in 2015, at 4 units, say, I'm paying a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether it's $3 or whether it's $10 later on down the line, it's still gonna be more money. I guess that was kind of one of my questions, why are we there now, instead of maybe trying to reduce that rate back to where it was? I mean, now we're higher now, it's new proposed rate, correct? Except for one time I figured out, one time.
It just depends on the customer and the usage.
Well, if I have the exact same usage, I'm gonna be paying more money.
Keep in mind that
And
under the old plan, we try to let people know we have 97% fixed costs.
Right.
And so what we did was we took the middle and we had the higher users pay some of the service charge to offset the lower users. We can't do that now. What we heard, right, wrong, or different, was it's confusing, number one. And number two, we don't want to pay for water that we don't use in the winter.
Well,
So that's why we're coming forward with a more simplified rate.
if you could roll it over, then, for a year, then during the summer, if the water is there available, then you've already paid for the water, so I don't understand that argument would be moot, because you already paid for it. You paid for it, you can have it.
We could have done a calculation where you rolled it over, but essentially what would happen if we let everybody roll over is there would be no consumption charges for anybody. And basically it'd be about $64 a month per the middle class instead of 54. And then the other ones would have gone up incrementally.
Well, I'm missing that, because what they're saying, if you charge them you have a set price for X amount of units per month.
Yep.
And if it doesn't cost any more money really to run that water, you can use 2 units and I can use 10 units. It doesn't cost any more to give me the 10 units, it's 2, so I don't understand that.
But when we built that, some of our revenue we got from fixed rates and some we got it from consumption. And when you let it was about 1.2 million was the consumption side. If you let everybody roll over, you wouldn't collect any consumption side because they would have enough banks for the summer. So somehow we would have to collect that extra.
So you had a built-in conservation and a way to get extra money, put that up. the first, I mean,
There's
So-
there's built-in conservation because.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah.
How is it gonna work this year when the state's mandating that we have to have conservation again? And I believe it was what, 20% or is it 33%?
33%.
Okay, 33%. And we already last year, the town in general, didn't use as much water. Is that 33% gonna be based on last year's reduction as well?
No, it goes back to 2013 still.
Okay, 2013, but still, so we have plenty of water now, we're at 103%. So we have plenty of water now, and now we're gonna be asked to pay a lot more and actually reduce what we used from what 2013 was. So essentially do what we did last year, because didn't the area reduce it overall like 36%? So what happens if we don't keep that 33%? Now, are we subject to that $10,000 fine per day type situation, or what?
We are, that's a decision the board's gonna have to make. Last year when these rolled out, we were very aggressive at explaining the need to conserve with our customers, a lot of outreach. No fines, we didn't issue any fines to anybody, and you guys responded well. But we were under a big threat from the state that if you don't do this, we're gonna fine you. Well, they went through 2015 and they fined hardly anybody. There was tons of agencies that didn't meet their target, and there was no fines handed out. So my job is to go to the board and make a recommendation, and it will be, let's just ask our customers to use water wisely. So the obvious things, but we don't want them, there's no reason this community needs to let their landscape sacrifice because the state mandated it. And we'll still get a cutback, because people will kind of pay more attention than they did in 2013. But hopefully you'll get to use the water you need to use to keep your landscape going, and the potential of being fined by the state is probably pretty low.
Okay, so, I just want to be sure that if this new rate plan goes into effect, that we're not going to hear later that, oh, well, the state mandated we have to conserve, and we didn't put that into the calculation. Is the probability, it's probable that the state is going to mandate this from now on?
Yeah.
And so is
Well,
that
it's
in the calculation?
That's a good question. This calculation is based on our consumption in 2014, which was 21% less than 2013. So it's already got 21% built into it. And then there's reserving built into it, that if the community went beyond the 21%, that's where the reserves try to balance that out.
Yeah, but $700,000 doesn't really go that far. I mean, there's other projects that the district needs to do besides just pay for this new process water treatment recycling plant, and so I'm not sure you're going to have enough money. Like, is this 2018 number, that rate right there, is that then going to be in effect from 2018 on, or are you going to need more rate increases after 2018?
Well, this debt number, if it held, it'd be for 20 years. We hope that if we can get the state revolving fund financing,
Right.
that 1.2 million turns into about 670,000 a year. So the increase of 9 to 17, so say 850, we're hoping that that's going to be 425. And when we find out what it is, that's what we're going to put in there. What the
Or there might be some other project that the board wants to do.
Yep.
That
I mean,
is-
we always have to balance between projects that we have to do, projects that we want to do.
So this.
And so it's a continuous balance that we have to meet.
The literature says it's a short-term rate change, but it's a permanent rate change, and after 2018, unless there's something else that happens, the rate will be set at 42.97 plus 1.61.
If nothing else happens, yes. But
for
you have my commitment, and I don't drive the board. You have my commitment that me and the CFO, when we get the budget done and we get what the financing is, we're going to come to the board with a new recommended rate structure. And I want to do this every year and continue to move that year out and fix these to whatever reality is. And we're hoping to have these kind of meetings before we start the 45-day process. So we have a lot more flexibility in guiding what.
You want to, this is a ceiling, and that it could adjust down.
Yes.
But you don't have to go through another Prop 218 process to adjust it down, only if you adjust it up, right?
Correct. But, you know, we've got folks come here tonight. They both have two sides of the story. I've been talking to a lot of them. I had a gentleman today that came and talked to me and said, boy, I hate this big jump from my $22.95 to $33. But 2 days before that, I had a guy come in that uses bottled water that said, why don't you make this $40 so my water can be $1.28? So if we open ourselves up to the community and get your input as best we can, we have to do 218 if we want to make this lower and this higher, or any adjustment along those lines. So generally, yeah, if our debt's lower, we don't need a Prop 218 to do that. But if we want to lower our service charge and put more on quantity or vice versa, we have to come back to the public to be able to do that.
Well, why is this being done at the 11th hour? The board's been seated for 10, 11, and 14 years. If they would have done something way back then, they could have had a very small increase. We could have paid for everything, we would have been in compliance, and we wouldn't have this issue.
Yep, you nailed it. If we would have went with our 12, 4, and 4 in 2011, we'd be in way better shape. If we didn't skip the last 2 years without a rate increase, we would have been in better shape. But, as was pointed out, our operations were pretty steady, and we were living within our means, trying to figure out what this big project was going to be. And we didn't want to come to the community until we knew what that cost was going to be.
But if the board speaks for the community, shouldn't the community know what's going on so we could discuss and vote on it
You haven't
as
been
a
there.
group, as opposed to being blindsided at the 11th hour? You know,
It's a good point. We've talked about the processed water in our newsletters. We have open and public meetings. Every board meeting's open to the public. Nobody shows up.
But if
The
they
Post
don't know
reported on
what the
those.
issues are, how are they supposed to show up?
But probably don't know what the issues are until it's like
Well,
in our lap.
It's not him, it's the board.
Go
Well, and
ahead.
then it's back to why hasn't the board done anything?
I have a question. I want to say something real quick to hook on to.
Okay, go ahead.
Robin, yes. About, okay, are we looking at this to be, you know, continuing after 2018? Are we anticipating all future expenses that might come up? And I want to raise something that Mr. Hunt threw out at the audience at the Performing Arts Center and kind of challenged us with it. Here you go, this dam is about to go and you're going to have to incur $30 million possibly to replace that Magalia Dam because it's in bad shape. Was that just something to scare us, or is that looming in the future?
Absolutely.
The dam in its current state is completely allowed by the DSOD. We've got no mandates to do anything other than maintain that lower level. So we don't have to do anything. If we were back to our 9,000 acre feet a year and continue to increase, and this goes back to Lauren who left, you know, one of those hard to calculate benefits. If we were at 9,000 because we didn't replace meters and we didn't put any effort in conservation and that kept creeping up, boy, the reality is we need more storage. But now that we've made these strides, it's gained us time on that fix or that problem. So, you know, the hope is, and I'm a little bit busy with rates right now, but the hope is to go to the federal government and Dianne Feinstein and say, here's a dam. What, you know, we don't get political. We work with both sides because we have to. We have a dam that is our water supply. It's low. We've got a community of 18,000 above it that's got fire risks. Need 4 lanes across it. There's a potential to make it bigger than even we need to provide environmental water releases into Butte Creek, which is a pretty big gem in the area. So that's kind of a long-term picture, is to try and get help that solves a lot of problems. But we got to take care of our immediate ones right now. Yeah.
I think we also though should consider the fact that the Pines, okay, is a situation with water situation is critical, and consequently, in talking to federal people and so on, broaden the picture. Much as we don't really have a responsibility to the Pines, okay?
But you make a good point, because when they run out of water, we will have a responsibility.
Well, the broader picture though should include that area.
That's a good point.
And which means if we do consider that and put together a reasonable plan, we should hopefully then be able to say, look at the government, give us some money to take care of the situation. Because also about raising Paradise Dam, okay?
Yeah. That's an option too.
Judge Vandergriff is long gone, so, and so, history there is,
that's an
not
option.
a possibility of raising it.
Yeah. She was up there.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I have a question about infrastructure, it's kind of a couple key here. Do you know how old our infrastructure is, and are we budgeting now to replace it in the future, and how far in the future?
Our main infrastructure that needs replacing, one is one tank that we're okay with now. That's an issue. It's not even a tank, it's actually, the treatment plant's in good shape. The pipes, we've got 170 miles of pipe in the ground. We have about 50, maybe 60 miles of old steel pipe to replace. We replace it currently with our own forces, and we do it, and we select those projects 2 ways. One, we replace it if the town's going to put a new road in, because we don't want an old pipe under that. But most of the drivers leak history, which pipes leak the most. Those are the ones we fix. Our lost water in our distribution system was at 30% 10 years ago. It's now at 6%. Because we've replaced pipe, we do leak detection every year to make sure we get those leaks when they're small. So we've cut a lot of it down, and we're in a spot now where we can do a pay-as-you-go. We don't need to go borrow. I mean, I did a number once. It was for that 60 miles to go out to a contractor to do was a huge number.
So it's calculated into this, it's
Yep.
not gonna be
It's in the-
another
It's in our
surprise.
pipeline, yeah.
And is it, the water's tested up at the dam or up at the treatment site, is that where the water's tested at?
It's tested in multiple spots. So we do testing there, and then we do weekly testing throughout the entire distribution system. Every Tuesday, right?
So as far as some of those old pipes you're talking about, do you think there's any health hazard with the water flowing through those deteriorating pipes?
They're not lead pipes. That's thankful. Thankful for that. They're old steel. No, we're flushing. You might have heard about it. We're trying to get the word out in your neighborhood. That's really good for water quality issues. But no, we haven't had any issues with that. It's been mostly big blowouts and stuff.
Given what she said, not drink any of the water, I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan.
Okay, going back on the rates here now, are they going to do, is the board going to do what they did last time? And if there's 5,000 people say we don't, 5,000, we don't want this rate, are they going to go, well, too bad? Is that something, that's their option?
Yeah, I'm going to change that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to cover. So we're having these meetings and listening to you folks. We've got employee concessions and the cuts. One of their decisions to make this rate lower is to not reserve. That's what I was going after. Go back.
Oh,
I get there. So one of the ways they can make this rate lower is not be as aggressive in this reserving. So that's a decision they need to make. This wetland study, $2.20 in the first year. I mean, you heard a lot of the discussion. There's a lot of opinions both ways. Ultimately, they're going to have to decide if they want to go down that path or not. So that's $2.20.
That's in the rate, somewhere. It's in there somewhere, we just don't
Yeah.
spell that out.
Yeah, it's in there. So that, you would take $2.20 right off the service charge.
Okay.
So we're going to have a board meeting on the 30th. Hopefully that the board can take all this information, everything we've done to date, and then tell the public, okay, this is what we're going to do, and these are the rates we plan on going forward with on the April 7th meeting, as long as we don't get a majority protest. So they're trying to make it a little less than it is.
Majority vote on 5 people. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, I mean, as long as we don't, they can't impose the rates unless, as long as you guys don't protest it, then they make a decision.
Okay, well, do we have to have paper numbers there? Do we have to have body numbers there? Or what numbers do we have to have there?
Same as last time.
Yeah.
Well,
Majority.
paper numbers, are we gonna get paper complaints to send in, bring with us? What?
They're in the mailer, there's some back there. We actually, we
Okay,
put them in the newsletter, so
Okay.
when you get your bill this month, you get another chance at the newsletter. I'll get to you, Robin, let me just kind of follow up on that. Because the question is, are we just gonna keep doing this until we get a rate you guys like?
That's why we need public input
2011.
from years ago.
Presented today, you need to operate our business, right?
Yes,
I mean, you could cut, if you cut the rate down, something else has to go.
yes,
We have,
yeah.
so
It-
$33 a month is what you really need.
Yeah.
If they come by and say, we only want $25 a month, what do you do for the $7?
Good
Not
point.
you.
We have to, if we don't get this rate approved by you folks, we will be doing serious cuts. We will not be prepared for emergencies, and we will be faced with significant exposure to the state. You can talk about the wetlands and the mechanical option, etc., but at the end of the day, we have a mandate to solve that problem. And if we don't get the funding to solve that problem, the state can take us over. And I'm not being facetious, and I don't mean this is a threat, but
No.
people need to understand, the state, if we're not meeting our obligations, they can come in and take us over. And they take us into, I forget the term, but there's a legal term for it.
It's almost like receivership.
Receivership, that's the word.
But then the rate would go high.
And then they set the rate however they want.
well, how can you accept it without, having the other debt of the physical plant involved then? I mean, I don't wanna walk into there and say, okay, I'm for the rate structure as it is, or I'll deal with the rate structure is, when I know that it's including the plant, the new plant, and I don't want the new plant.
I understand you don't want the new plant, but the state wants the new plant.
The state wants a new plant?
The state wants us to fix the problem, and the new plant is what does that.
What's the problem? Is the problem
The
solved by the
district.
wetlands?
That's up to question.
I know, but, well, is it solved by the wetlands in some other instances then? So I mean, I don't wanna be voting for the plant, physical plant. How do I not vote for physical plant and give you rates that you can operate on?
That you don't get that option, unfortunately.
Well, then,
We have, we,
may as well, I mean, Mr. Hunt will sit there and, you know, take the role and everything like that, and, you know, we need the new rates, you tell us we need the new rates and everything to do what you need to do in your budget. It's a sham.
Our frustration is the board has known that this problem needed to be solved
Right.
since 2011.
Right.
And they have done nothing
Right.
Nothing.
up to this point.
Right.
And now we have less than
Right.
2 years to get it done.
Right.
We don't like the rate increase
Take a look
at
at
this level. I see no way around it, however,
Thank you.
because the state will come in and take it over, and we'll pay through the nose if they do.
Let me take a minute to clarify, because there's a lot of people saying the board did nothing. We started this in 2010, 2011. Okay, we knew we had something to solve. And the initial estimates were $2 to $3 million. And I talked about how it grew. Well, it grew, and the time got chewed up because we were trying to find the cheapest alternative that would work for all of you. So we looked at different options, multiple ways of solving the problem, including wetlands, and stopping to look at wetlands. That caused a delay, until we finally got to a point where the board decided this is the solution and we need to move forward. We don't like it, it's not the cheapest one, but this is what we need to do. So work's been going on. This hasn't just started, last year.
You said receivership?
Right.
I think injunction.
But the rate adjustment should have started back in
2 years ago.
2012.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I feel kind of stupid asking this. Did you ever have a screen with revenues, projected revenues? What are you estimating with the new rate increase that your revenue will be in 2016?
Yeah.
The estimate, I don't have it on the screen, but essentially you take this plus what the rates bring in, and it equals our total amount. And the estimate is based on 2014 usage, so that's key. So if we use more than 2014, there'll be a surplus that would go into reserves. If we use less, then we would draw from reserves to balance that out until the next year.
So you're saying that we really need the service charge that you're putting forth there, there's not any wiggle room to reduce that.
There's a debt of couple million dollars,
Yep.
or whatever the figure is on the new plant that doesn't have to be there as part of the budget.
If you reduce the service charge, then you increase consumption charge. And that's what we hope to look deeper into the next time we do this. Robin, have a question?
Yeah, let's see. I had several questions around in there, but the board has not considered or directed the staff to consider just continuing the NPDES permit. In other words, why not treat the water, the processed water, and then release the water into Magellan Reservoir? So in other words, what's the thing called, the incline part of the process that's being proposed?
The incline plate settler?
Yeah, the incline plate. So the water that comes from that process, putting it in Magellan Reservoir, continuing a permit, that would be clean enough. And then you don't have to do all the rest of that project. It would be a lot cheaper. And we still have the water.
I'd
We still
have
have
to
the
dig
water.
into it. I don't think it will take care of the aluminum. That will still be an issue, because part of the reason we can take the aluminum and put it back into the headworks of the plant is we're putting the aluminum to grab the dirt particles together. So that's just adding to the process of helping that dirt particle. So we'll put in a little less potentially. So that one may not be solved.
Well, some
With the
solids are
process.
coming out from that incline
Yeah.
process. I would think there'd be aluminum in that material.
Some, but what we're experiencing now is soluble aluminum. That's what's getting us in the violation. And keep in mind, I didn't make the point, but this is, by recycling it, we're saving 500 to 600 acre feet a year from not having to draw from the reservoirs. So that's 10%.
But if you release the processed water into the Magellan Reservoir from some new process, we're going to use it anyway.
No, what we're finding right now, that's a good point. We're releasing into Magellan right now,
Right.
and all of it's lost through evaporation and leakage in the dam. So You know, you would see Magalia rise if we were gaining from that, and we're not. So by using this process, it stays in Paradise, which doesn't have the leakage problem.
So how are you getting that soluble aluminum out in this proposed process?
We're not.
It's just gonna go right back into our water supply
Yes.
at a
And-
rate of 10% volume. That doesn't sound good.
But it will offset, it will be used again in the same process it was used initially when we put it in the water.
So you won't have to add as much aluminum?
That's a real potential, yes. Yes,
Well,
go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Supposedly a pilot study was done by these engineers, because I was at that meeting where they said they did a pilot study.
Yep, we
I
did.
would like to see their pilot study. They should have that in their report, so we can see the evidence that they gained from their pilot study.
Okay, we'll try and make that more transparent.
And at the March meeting, I would sure love to see some other alternative on the agenda, such as, well, let's look at, could we possibly just keep on doing the NPDES permit and have some process that would make that water contain less pollution, that would still meet the needs of the NPDES permit.
Right,
That was an option. It
right.
was cheaper alternative. That's the option we would be proceeding with.
So
Yeah,
you've
we knew it
already,
would
you've already looked at that?
It's part of the design process.
Because the only instructions I've seen the board given or consider is to just eliminate the permit entirely. And every option starts with eliminating the permit
Yeah,
entirely.
that's true.
So let's see an option for not eliminating the permit.
Well, the
Can we come up with
wetlands
something
doesn't
cheaper?
eliminate it.
Yeah. It comes with a lot of risk. That's why we're eliminating the permit. Because the levels we have to meet, for what we know we're having trouble with, and the levels of other things that may come in the future, it's a big risk to be able to continue that permit. Remember, and I'll get to you, it's called a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. The goal of the entire program is to give people time to stop discharging. That's what the goal of the EPA is for you to not discharge. So just because we can meet today, they're going to continue to crunch those down until they meet their goal, which is stopping discharge. It started way back with manufacturing processes, okay? And the reason they put this system of permits in is so that industry had time to change their process to not discharge anymore.
Industry's
And then-
discharging all kinds of pollution.
And
They have to
they-
stop.
But they've worked towards eliminating it and reducing it, and we're in that same boat.
The industry of non-pollution.
Go ahead.
Okay, I may have missed this, I apologize, but in the proposal of the new rate, is the meter capacity ratios being considered?
Mhm.
And, you know, the ratios, the size of the meter?
Yes. It is on
So,
business.
It's like, say, a 2-inch pipe user, whether they're actually using water night or not, just because I have property in another county and I pay over $100 a month just for the right to keep that 2-inch pipe and not have it turned off or permanently removed.
We
And
have,
it's a modest revenue, I'm sure, overall with all the commercial accounts.
all of our business accounts will pay the rate based on their meter size,
Okay.
proportionally.
And that's in the.
Yes, so our 3-inch meter
What those
is the
numbers
easy
are.
ones. The 3-inch meter serves 10 times what a residential meter does. They will pay 10 times the service charge.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
It was I'm sorry, it was mentioned that the debt in 16 could be eliminated if we went to wetlands, but that's not true. Wetlands is gonna cost more than.
You're still gonna have a project. Yes.
That's
Yes, sir.
The residential rate, the residential rate's gonna be the same whether you got a 5/8, 3/4, or 1-inch meter?
Yes. Yeah, we've got a varied mix in our residential, just because of the history of the district, but we treat them all the same.
The
Yeah.
study that you talked about from the December 15, where can we find that on your PID website? because we could not find it.
Okay. It is, it's not on the My PID bill anymore. It's gonna be probably in our document library, but if you hang around after the meeting, I'll look on our website and find it for you and show you where it is. Yeah. Other questions?
I think it'd be helpful at the next meeting in March to have the costs and the expenditures really clear, you know, so that how much you expect to gain from this rate increase
Okay.
compared with the cost. So it's just super clear.
I'll add that slide.
I asked last meeting about your grant writer and how many grants have been applied for and received. And basically, we were told there hasn't been.
So we've applied for lots of grants. We just applied for a USBR. We've tried for some state ones. We have, we put in for a emergency, it's not FEMA, it's FEMA. Potentially to pay for part of the project. We've got a it's not Fed, but there'll be a resolution for another one we're trying to get.
Grant writer doing that, or?
Yes, yes. And we did actually get together with the Fire Safe Council, it doesn't help this project, but we got a $250,000, maybe $350,000 grant for a watershed from the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. To help us.
Cut those trees down.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot more acres than that. But we're always out looking, and we're trying.
Well, applying for and receiving are two different things, though.
Yeah, like grants are very, very competitive these days. It's really tough, but doesn't mean we're not trying.
You know, from this process, I've seen the levels of pollution at Getty's and the Magalia Reservoir are really high. It makes me really nervous to be drinking water from the Magalia Reservoir. I'd like to see, you know, you say you're doing regular reporting of the water quality coming out of the plant. Can we have like regular reporting online of the water quality coming out of the plant so we can just see? Because like I said, when we're using Magalia water in the processing plant, it makes me nervous.
We're about to release our data from 2015. We actually just got an encouragement from the American Water Works Association to share information more frequently, and we're definitely looking at that. It's how can we get it out there, understandable. We're certainly not hiding anything, but we'll try and get it out more often if we can.
Yeah.
I thought the Magalia Reservoir was just backwash from the treatment plant, that our drinking water comes from the Paradise Reservoir through the treatment plant and then directly out through the pipes to us, that we're not drinking water from the Magalia Reservoir.
You are at times.
At times?
Until up to 2007, every drop went through Magalia Reservoir. And then we put the bypass pipe in, and most of the time we use the bypass and divert Paradise Lake water out before it gets to Magalia. But when we have rain events, is one reason we use Magalia, because the runoff has a really high changing water quality that is not best for treating water, and it's more consistent in Magalia. So storm events will make the switch. We make the switch to draw it down before winter to capture as much water as we can. And currently we're using it right now because we're trying to draw Magalia down back to its allowable level. So it's a mix. It is.
But the Magalia Reservoir water is going through the treatment plant before it comes out to us.
Oh, most definitely, yes. Yes.
So, I mean, so why would Robin be concerned? Because
Just
we're not getting the dichlorobromomethane nor the aluminum. That's being taken out before it gets to us.
Yes.
So, well, no, because otherwise there would be you wouldn't be in violation of the NPDS permit.
No, that's when it's flushed, the filters are flushed.
We're meeting all standards regardless of what source we have.
We're in violation because it's being released into the McGarren Reservoir,
Yeah.
and it's a
Good to
danger
make
to
that
wildlife.
clear. Our drinking water is always,
The ponds are right above the reservoir. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And when the water is released from the ponds, you said it goes into the county reservoir.
it does, yeah.
But then it gets treated.
It
And
does.
and it's also blended. I mean, it's a small part of the total storage area.
Oh,
Yes,
Of the 170 miles of pipes in ground that we have,
Yeah.
you said there's approximately 60 miles that still need replacing.
yes,
Do you have a map of those that still need to be replaced?
yes, we do.
May I have a copy of that?
Well, it's this thick. If you're interested in a certain area, we can show you. We don't release,
You don't just have a map of Paradise that shows basically where,
you know, we have a map book. So it's this thick, 11 by 17s. And we certainly, if you want to see an area, we can show it to you. We don't, we do not release our maps out to the public for security reasons. Ever since 9/11, that's an issue we protect because we just do. It's just best to do it that way. I won't get into the scary details of what could
an
happen.
overall map of Paradise, like color coded, which has been replaced, which hasn't.
No, we have maps of all our pipeline systems. It's in a map book and it shows them all, but we don't have a single one that we have printed out. But if you're interested in a certain area, in your neighborhood, it actually comes cross country. And it doesn't even come up the road you drive up to get to your house. We have some
Right.
interesting places.
Yeah, comes down the back road.
Yep. I can tell you that you're on an old steel mill. That I know.
And that's the cast iron.
No, it's just steel. It's not lead pipe.
What?
No, not lead, but
It's not cast iron, we're not cast iron either, we have steel. That's what we're replacing.
Chemicals react with that?
Anybody else? Thank you very much, I appreciate you coming out. Holler if you have any questions, our newsletter's out there, if you want to grab it before it gets to your bills. Okay, thank you.